Over the Greek debt crisis. So, very first, a brief outline. I will be looking at the crisis through 2009 and what caused it in the first place. And then I will be looking at both the 2010 bailout of the Troika and IMF, the 2015 re-crisis with the election of the Syriza government, and the situation today. Throughout all of this, I will be analyzing what went wrong with the bailout agreements of the Troika, but I will also have another section where I look at what they did wrong and how it helped Greece in my analysis section, and then, of course, concluding it. So, to begin, the crisis through 2009. In the 1990s, the Greek government began reporting lower debt than they actually had. And the reason for this was that if you reported lower debt than you actually had, you could get lower interest payments. And this meant that as long as your economy was growing faster than your interest payments, like than the interest rate was, you could conceivably get out of your debt. And this would be very beneficial for an economy. But when you're reporting lower debt than you actually have, this creates issues. The Greek government joins the Eurozone in 2001 and adopts the euro as their official currency, which means more cheap loans for Greece. Now, in 2008, the 2008 global recession hits Greece especially hard. And the reason for this is that Greece as a economy is primarily founded on tourism and shipping, and both of these flounder quite a bit when nobody wants to look outside of their country because their own country is in an economic crisis. This means that in 2009, when a new government's elected, they reveal that 13.9% of their GDP is debt. And this could be due to the higher labor costs. Joining the Eurozone, it could be due to the rampant tax evasion that had been happening in Greece for quite some time at this point. It's due to the fact that they were hit especially hard by the recession and are taking on this debt that they can't really pay for. But when they reveal this 13.9% debt and then later reveal that it's actually closer to 15% of their GDP is debt, there's a whole lot of fallout. Investors realize that Greece is no longer a safe place to invest like they thought it was, so they raise their interest rates out of fear. This creates a self-perpetuating cycle where Greece has to take on these high interest rate loans because otherwise their economy would collapse. But with taking on these high interest rate loans, they're only furthering themselves into debt, and they're only perpetuating this cycle of people seeing them as an unstable economy. So, in 2010, the Troika steps in, and the Troika is a collection of the Central European Bank, the European Commission, and the International Monetary Fund. And this Troika loans 110 billion euros as a bailout to Greece. What this does is it buys back a significant part of the Greek debt onto other European banks, as well as gives Greek banks capital so they can actually continue to run their business. The problems with this are many, though. First of all, as it's not exactly a $110 billion gift, it is a loan to Greece, I bet a cheaper loan than they probably would have gotten from investors. It doesn't take Greece out of debt, not by a long shot. Furthermore, it only buys back breathing room, with a lot of the tangible effects being taken out on the interest Greece already owes onto debt. So what this means is Greece now isn't in danger of defaulting on their loans, which would collapse Europe and then through the domino effect collapse the world economy. But it does mean that the debt crisis doesn't go away. And then furthermore, and most importantly, it requires a lot of austerity measures to be taken, and this hurts Greece. So what's impacted this? First of all, the debt shrinks to roughly 5 billion euros which is relatively small, but it quickly grows again. And then but more importantly, the economy of Greece contracts by, some reports say, up to 25%. What is correct is that in the following years, the unemployment rate would rise to above 25%, peaking at 27.5% roughly, and 50% of Greece relies on pensions because, as you can see from the population pyramid, a pretty significant amount of Greece is 65 or above or rapidly aging into that category. And so 50% of households in Greece had somebody in that household that relied on pensions. So it created widespread issues. Unemployment rates rose up to 25% across the country, but were as high as 50% in youths and younger population. And this creates so many issues for Greece. And the debt crisis is far from solved by these bailouts. The breathing room, as we'll see, existed more as a way for other European banks to distance themselves from the Greece economy and ensure that they were stable and gave them a little bit more breathing room. So, fast forward to 2015, and a new leftist government is elected. This government is called the Syriza, and they announce an end to austerity. They say we are going to bring back social programs, we're going to bring back pensions, etc., etc. During this time, the rest of the Eurozone is leveling out. The banks that took on Greek debt are beginning to kind of get rid of that debt, and they're doing all right. However, Greece is in no position to leave the Eurozone because they rely on the stability of the other countries, and if they do leave, their leaving the Eurozone will undermine the euro as a currency and cause a lot of problems on a global scale. However, they do want to end this austerity because it's hurting Greece. The people really, really want their social programs back, and Greece's economy isn't exactly growing. However, when the Troika government says we're gonna end austerity, and the Greek people say yes, we want austerity measures over, the Troika says, okay, you don't get money anymore. They stop loaning money, and this leads to mass panic. Banks start to run out of money quickly. ATMs are reduced to printing only or dispensing only 10 euro notes because they ran out of 20 euro notes. Banks put 140 euro limits on the country. At one point, it got so bad that the amount of money physically within Greece equaled roughly 50 euros per citizen of Greece. But because Greece is part of the Eurozone, they can't simply print more money. And this is one of the main problems with the Eurozone, is countries can make financial decisions on their own, but they can't print more money on their own. That has to be printed through the euros. Furthermore, these other banks, such as the German banks, such as the French banks, such as the British banks, they don't want to help bail Greece out. And the reason for this is their banks are just now getting out of the Greek debt they incurred from the 2010 bailouts, and they don't really see a point in helping Greece because all it's going to do is hurt their economy. Here, the Troika should have continued these measures or in some way negotiated rather than completely axing measures, simply because cutting loans to Greece only makes the problem worse, and not providing a system for Greece to get back in to the global economy is not going to help and threatens the Eurozone. However, as we fast forward to present day, Greece is still in a lot of debt. They have scheduled debt payments well past 2060, and they really have no end in sight. However, the government continues to agree with the Troika. They continued to adopt austerity measures. They went back on their promise to end austerity just because they needed the support from the IMF. And they are actually reframing their economy to be stronger, and they started issuing bonds in 2017. In 2018, they had repaid a lot of the 2010. They had repaid the 2010 bailout, and they're honestly on the up and up. As you can see from this graph, they are down from 183% of their GDP as in debt to 165% of their GDP in debt. This is a lot to say. This is akin to saying that the guy that got hit by a bus has a stable heart rate. It's like, yes, he is great. Now you can say he is going to get better, but this doesn't necessarily mean he's okay or is going to be okay in the perceivable future. So, what went wrong, and was this situation handled well? Well, basically, no, the situation was not handled well. First of all, you have to look at the culture of Greece. Greece has a culture of government distrust. They don't like the government in any way, shape, fashion, or form, and they distrust it quite a bit. However, due to reliance, they will take the government for whatever the government can get them. And so a lot of people are reliant on things such as pensions. So when austerity happens and social programs start getting cut, Greece's population literally starts rioting in the streets, and it took serious economic reforms to help stop unions from paralyzing the economy because Greece did not agree with austerity measures. Furthermore, unemployment was over 20% for half a decade from 2012 to 2017, and like I said earlier, peaked at 27.5%. Furthermore, this focus on long-term success that the IMF implemented in Jamaica and has implemented internationally doesn't help Greece at all. Greece is heavily reliant, as we mentioned before, on tourism, and tourism is a very spot of the moment economic reliance, because if you're a country that's wallowing in, say, almost 30% unemployment rate, owing more than your GDP in debt, people don't want to come to your country. And the bailouts that the IMF and the Troika provided were more to help the Eurozone and more to stop the Eurozone from collapsing and give other European countries time than to help Greece. And this is one of the main problems of the IMF. They look at how is it going to work on a world stage rather than how does it work within Greece. So loaning these with all these austerity measures helps out on a world stage, helps the European Union do all right, helps the Eurozone not collapse, but it doesn't help Greece. The IMF should have been way more flexible with austerity measures. You can't cut pensions when half of your citizenship relies on pensions. And this shows that they didn't really learn anything from Jamaica. They have a one-size-fits-all policy for economic reform, and it doesn't work. And this didn't help Greece. Greece's economy didn't stabilize until recently, and although the unemployment rate's on the decline, the debt is on a decline, they're still in over their heads for quite some time. So, overall and in conclusion, it's a dark time for Greece. Back in the 1990s, yes, debt problems weren't caused by the IMF. They weren't caused by the Troika. They were caused by the Greece people having distrust of the government and committing tax evasions. The Greece government trying to work it out internally and lie about the amount they were actually in debt. And that was a Greece fault, but when it was discovered and these bailout issues were measured and these bailout packages were given to Greece, they don't help measures. They don't help Greece, they help the world, and that actually brings the Greece economy further down. And even though you could look at it and say, no, look, if it weren't for the IMF and the Troika allowing austerity and re-allowing these bailouts post the 2015 elections, it's not genuine, and it's disingenuous to say that that is a benefit of the IMF when they created a lot of the problems that Greece is in. And there's such a long ways to go. Like I was saying, the man hit by the truck, like, just because he's physically going to live long term doesn't mean that it's a great future. And all things considered, the IMF didn't learn from Jamaica. They did not help Greece get out of debt. For my sources, thank you very much.